All right, sit back, relax. It's time for another Laneway Talks.
Hi everybody, we're talking to Paul Janovskis today from Cattletruck. He's a long-term member of Laneway Music, part of the family, and we've known him since the 80s when he had his band Cattletruck and a big hit with Resurrection Shuffle. How are you, Paul?
Never been better, thanks, Vince.
Mate, we talk about, we do a fairly similar profile on all our interviews, and we start by saying, where did you grow up, Paul?
Well, I was actually born in Auckland, New Zealand, and then my family moved over here in '69 to Melbourne.
Yeah.
I consider myself an Australian. We lived a couple of...
Yeah, I was going to say, well, where did you go to school here?
Well, we kind of moved out to the eastern suburbs when we got to Melbourne, and I went to school initially at, where was it? I think we were living in Bulleen, and I went to primary school at Bulleen Primary School,
Yeah,
I think.
Pretty upmarket suburb there.
Oh, kind of, yeah. And then we moved to Lower Templestowe, which was kind of...
That's even more upmarket.
Well, was it?
Yeah.
it was kind of tract homes, if you know that USA kind of term. You know, there was developments out there basically, and lots of open spaces and unused land back then, but there was patches of houses. So yeah, we moved out there.
Well, tell me, Paul, so that's at like the age of 9 you moved to Australia. Have you got any interest in music at that age? I started at about the age of 8 or 9 myself, playing drums. Where were you? Were you actually, a bit of a budding guitar player by that stage?
Well, it all sort of really came from my father, who amongst his sort of professional careers as a microbiologist and then an executive, he was also a really good musician. And he'd played guitar and sung and played harmonica kind of all his life, really. And so, from a very young age, there was always a guitar around, and he'd, play around the house quite a lot.
Paul,
so
when you say that like that, did you used to have like a Sunday music session or whatever? My father was a clarinet player, so on Sunday nights after dinner, he would get the clarinet out and he'd play for us all. Did you have anything?
Well, we would, nothing so formal, but my father would often play just for relaxation. In fact, he played with bands back when he was a teenager in New Zealand. So he was playing with kind of hot, largely Maori kind of dance bands, dance rock and roll bands. Back when he was a youngster, so he was pretty good. Anyway, so he would just play around the house. We didn't do anything formal, but so there was always, but it was always around. And then when I was probably very young, I don't know, maybe I was 10 or 11. He decided he needed some backing on bass guitar, and so he bought me it was really for us, but he bought me a cheap bass guitar. And so I started playing, bass guitar, backing him.
So that was your first initiation, playing bass?
Probably, but I'd also grab his guitar and mess around, and I was always watching him and trying to sort of follow what he was doing.
Well, around that time that you're doing that, what was the flavour of music that you were listening to as a young 10, 11, 12-year-old?
When I was that young, I had the old Valve radio, which I painted metallic green, if I remember correctly, that was in my bedroom. So I was just listening to, whatever the AM rock stations were in Melbourne at the time, probably 3XY or when no wrinklies flew at the time, apparently. And but my father had a really broad taste in music, and he would, he had a record player and records, and he would listen to anything from Russian military choirs through to Ike and Tina Turner, Rolling Stones, Desmond Dekker, lots of sort of R&B stuff. So he loved Daddy Cool, stuff like that.
Was that influencing you?
Yes, it was. Yeah, big time. So that was my first exposure to lots of different music. So
where did you?
It was pretty broad.
And what did you start doing after that? Did you? You obviously then picked up the guitar because you're a guitarist. Did you just just play around for a couple of years, like a lot of people, and, you rehearse at home on your own and think you're the Beatles and play with the Beatles and, and go, maybe I should get a band together or get some mates and do the garage band?
Well, it's sort of interesting. This is probably not an unusual story for that era, but certainly out in the burbs where I was growing up, there was not a lot to do for youngsters. There wasn't much going on, to be honest, and you're a long way from the city. Public transport wasn't great, so you tended to make your own fun, and your choices were sort of riding trail bikes, building your own early stage BMX bike and banging around on that, hanging out at the local shopping centre, or getting together and playing with other mates in the local neighbourhood, who of varying abilities and across all sorts of instruments. So there was kind of a little garage band scene going on.
I mean, but what you're kind of explaining there is that due to there being no real social media, mate, we had to make our own entertainment. And so if music was such a big part, even though, I had the Valve radio too, and that's what you had. Then you got the little solid state and you think, man, I'm so lucky. But, music was such a big part of life in a sense for entertainment. And therefore, if you, like you said, you hang out at the local shopping centre, or you got to make your own fun, ride your push bike or get your guitar and start, rehearsing in the garage.
That's exactly right, and so that's what we did. And there was all sorts of little acts. There were some really great musicians in the neighbourhood as well. And so I was playing with a number of little sort of garage bands. We'd be annihilating Deep Purple and trashing the Rolling Stones and making a mess of Jimi Hendrix. But it was great fun, and there was less bass players around than there were guitarists. Of course, everyone wanted to be a guitarist, and so I was not a bad bass player, so I found myself in quite a bit of demand.
What about vocals too? I mean, you're a vocalist, of course. And how did you discover you could sing? It's pretty hard.
There was always people that wanted to be singers, and so I was working in little bands that had working. I use the word loosely, but playing with little bands that had singers or wannabe singers, most of whom weren't very good, but some of whom were. So I wasn't, didn't really take that up until a bit later. I kind of remember. I think I probably wrote one of my probably the first song I wrote was, I don't know, probably in 1976 or something, and which I wrote it, and so I sang it, and I think that was probably when I started singing. But my father was a really good singer, so I was I think that's how I got it, I sort of inherited it. But I didn't, because there was lots of other sort of wannabe singers around, I didn't, I took to it quite a bit later from when I started playing guitar.
Things always get more serious when you get to high school. Now, it's not sex, drugs and rock and roll, but it's girls and rock and roll. And
that's right.
If you can be a rock and roller, you're a very popular boy. So, and the maturity musically comes in at that, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. That's, I think, when your music maturity develops, and that's where you get an instinct for what you like. So what were you doing?
Well, I was pretty much doing that. I discovered that I guess that you playing music back then tended to make you quite popular with girls and your mates and all these other people. So I was doing that. I mean, we were doing that for a while. There was gigs to be had. There was, something to play at the local social club. There were occasional dances and what have you around. So that was a big bonus. And it was a little bit, there was one period there around that age, I think. I was kind of like a surfy, right? But, I had the long blonde hair and would wear all the sort of surfy gear.
Oh, yeah.
And I'd play with one local garage band who were sort of similar, but I don't know if you remember back in the days, there was the skinheads and the sharpies,
absolutely,
versus the surfies as two kind of subcultures. And there was basically a local skinhead band as well, who were really good guys and were actually quite good. They didn't have a bass player,
so you joined.
So I was quite lucky because they were like, well, geez, even though you're a surfy, you're a pretty good bass player. Come and play with us. So I was kind of working across. I was playing with the local skinhead band with my surfy outfit on, and I was playing with the local kind of surf. So I was doing, I really enjoyed that. My father made the fairly quite a big mistake of, I think he and I went halves in a really quite a serious Fender, beat up old Fender Bassman 50 amp and a quad box, which was very much, overkill for a teenage boy.
Yeah.
And I'd have that in my little bedroom and I'd be cranking it, and it was just mental, driving everyone crazy. Whenever I wasn't at school or studying or what have you, I'd be, banging out those AC/DC riffs at concert level volume in the neighbourhood. It was terrible.
How was the divide between school and music? Were you going to pursue an education, path, or was music had settled in and that's what you were going to do?
Well, look, to be honest, it was a really big distraction, and it was something that I far preferred doing than, study and school. I was probably a mediocre student, but only through lack of application. To be honest, I was just very, very much more interested in music by that stage, and I realised I was sort of I wasn't bad at it.
So where were we heading then? So you're on the bass, you're not a fully fledged guitarist at all, you're bass. Where are we heading? When's the first band come along where you go, I'm starting to get serious now?
Well, what was a little bit interesting at that period, so I was probably, I don't know, I can't remember what formal year I was at school, at high school, probably quite young, I don't know, Form 4 or something.
Yeah.
But I digress. But what was interesting or unusual was that just within a couple of blocks of where we lived at in Templestowe, within 2 streets there was, I don't know how many, there was a couple of guitarists, but also up just around the corner was the Seymour's house, which was Nick Seymour and Mark Seymour.
Golly.
And we were mates. They're a bit older than me.
Yeah.
We were kind of mates, and I really looked up to them. And they were both at university at this stage. They're a bit older than me. But, they were playing at home, and then, I would go around and watch them and pick up on what they were doing, and they were very good. And then I would sort of make myself or kind of go, I'm playing with you guys now. And so I'd sort of, little youngster, I'd be in there and I'd be, playing along with them, just casually, really. But we did do a few parties together here and there. And so, that was literally my neighbours.
Well, that's a great initiation, that's for sure.
Well, it was. And they knew my father and really liked him, and he really liked them. And, we'd sort of all, sometimes they'd play with him a little bit on rare occasions. It was a funny little thing. And then my sister, who's 4 years younger than I am, she was at Greythorn High, and I vaguely remember, so I think it must have been a Saturday afternoon or something, my father and I were hanging out in the lounge room at home and just playing. He was playing guitar, I was playing bass, we were just mucking around, running through a few songs, and then my sister turned up with her kind of recent new best friend from high school, who was Kate Soberano, a very, very young Kate Soberano. And so Kate and my sister come in, and and it was all quite friendly. And then I don't remember what song we chose to do, but I think we probably said, so we hear you're a singer, let's do a song. And I don't remember what it was, but away we went. Kate started singing, and I remember my father sort of giving me a sideways glance, basically going, this girl's incredible. This young teenage girl is incredible, and I could only agree. So, yeah, it was a funny little scene.
Isn't that interesting, Paul, how I do get this story from a few people where musicians have friends at a young age, and they're people that have, gone on to heights, and it seems to attract the likes attract. You get people like that because there's some big names there that you're talking about.
Yes. Well, I was 20 foot from greatness, through my adolescent years, but it was quite good. It was something to aspire to for me. I when I was sort of occasionally regularly hanging around with Nick and Mark Seymour, they weren't doing me any favours. They wouldn't really show me anything.
Yeah, gotcha.
they'd sort of go, all right, you can hang around and watch, you know. So I'd watch what they were playing, and then I'd go home and I'd try and I'd sort of work it out myself. They were well advanced from where I was, and had very interesting taste in music, you know. So it was kind of cool, and those guys were into kind of like, I don't know, it's like pre-punk stuff. So it was through them that I heard not only the Doobie Brothers, but things like the Vibrators and the Velvet Underground and Lou Reed and all this very interesting, the Ramones, you know, all this really early stuff, really, really early on that you would never hear. You weren't hearing anywhere in Australia, you know, at all.
Get it on 3XY anyway.
Oh, no, absolutely not. But they were very into that, as were their other sort of musical colleagues at the time, and because they were all at university or, you know, tech.
So we're getting a bit of a picture of where your music depths are coming from, really. You start to name some of those acts. So so what happens from there? Where, you know, because obviously you didn't go out and start gigging with Nick and Mark and Kate Separano. So what happened?
What happened? Well, I don't think I was really doing that much. But then, I studied double bass very briefly when I was at Melbourne High School, which had a very strong music department, but I really wasn't interested in the formalised side of the very good music program that school luckily had at the time, because I was like, no, I'm playing with other bands on the weekend. I'm doing the real thing. You know, I'm not going to go and join the high school band or play in the orchestra, which was probably stupid of me, but you know, I had a lot of other stuff going on. So when was that? So sort of 17, 18. Well, I was kind of like a little bit of a gang leader at that particular school, and I had my little...
But you didn't have a band. You didn't have a band, did you?
I don't think I really had a band at that stage, no.
Well, let's move up to what was the first band that you had formally that you know?
Well, it's all a little bit vague, but I was a huge Hunters and Collectors fan right from the early days, and they had their original guitarist was a guy called Ray Tostiguera, and it was kind of an interesting dynamic, because Ray was basically a suburban kind of Doncaster boy, and he was kind of a disco guy. And I don't know if you remember back to those very early Hunters and Collectors tracks, such as Talking to a Stranger. A lot of the guitar motifs were these kind of really plinky, super clean, little kind of plinky, almost disco funk guitar parts.
Well, now that you've said it, I'm going to listen to it after this interview and see what I think.
They were from Ray, and it was from Ray's kind of disco influence, a little bit of a Nile Rodgers chic kind of influence in his guitar style, which was a real contrast to this kind of jungle industrial feel that the Hunters and Collectors were doing at the time.
Would Mark talk to you, by the way, Mark Seymour, or he'd never talk to you?
Oh, I'd definitely say hello, yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Haven't seen him for many, many years.
Yes.
Anyway, long story, trying to cut the long story short, but there was a bit of a dichotomy there going on within that band, because the rest of them were sort of intellectuals, and they were all, you know, either at university or finishing university, you know. They were all quite intellectual, really, as was the sort of style of music they were doing, in a sense. And so, you know, on one side you've got this kind of Italian disco guy from the burbs. On the other hand, you've got the majority of that band being kind of, you know, quite intellectual with really left-wing or really left-leaning kind of musical influences, such as, you know, Can from Germany, Velvet Underground, all kinds of different influences.
Was Flotsam Jetsam before Hunters or after? It was before, wasn't it?
Oh, you mean the Jetsons?
Yeah. Wasn't it Flotsam Jetsam?
No, Flotsam Jetsam was Sydney band.
Right, so it was the Jetsons, yeah?
The Jetsons, yeah. That was when they were all. That was before Hunters.
Yeah.
Some of the same people. That was kind of like a party covers band who were quite good and did play around a bit.
Yeah.
Anyway, there was a falling out between the guitarist, Ray, and the rest of that band. So two things happened. Hunters were auditioning the guitarist, and I actually went and had a fairly atrocious audition with them, which obviously didn't work.
You were a bit nervous, were you?
Sort of. I was probably quite a bit too young as well.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I knew Ray, of course, and then I think I got a call from Ray.
Yeah.
A couple of months after he'd left or been kicked out or however that worked out, going, I'm starting this new kind of like a disco funk R&B band, looking for a bass player. You're pretty good. Do you want to come and do it? And I went, yeah, all right. So that was an act called Soldiers of Fortune.
Right.
This was Ray's new band, and really nothing at all like kind of Collectors. But it was, it was quite a good act, and so I joined them, and we.
Off you go and tour.
We rehearsed a bit, and then we played around. We didn't tour, but we did quite a few shows in Melbourne, and it was quite well attended. I remember we played the club in Collingwood. We played the Underground. It was kind of like it was very funky. I was playing bass.
Yeah,
it was all right.
So how long that go on for? A year?
Yeah, probably about a year.
Yeah,
not much longer at all.
So
a bit weird.
So what happens there at the end of that?
Well, nothing really. I don't know. I sort of don't think I did much in the way of music for a while.
Yeah. Are we talking you're in your early 20s now?
Yes. Yeah.
So you've decided to go to work and you're not doing music?
Well, I didn't have a lot of choices. I had to live. So,
I think all of us, yeah.
I just sort of, stopped. I think I just stopped music. I still loved it, but I just kind of stopped playing for a little while, or just there was nothing going on, no bands around that I was interested in. So, that was kind of, I was DJing as well. I sort of started DJing at clubs and what have you. So, I was doing that one.
How did the spark come back?
It was funny, really. A couple of guys that I knew who were living out in Kew. I'm not sure. I think I might have been living in Abbotsford at the time. Jamie Martin and Tony Dennis. Tony was playing bass and Jamie was playing drums. Jamie had worked. I think he'd worked with a band briefly called Wild Dog Rodeo. Mm-hmm. Which I think Charlie Todd, the sax player, might have played with. Anyway, that had ended. But anyway, Tony and Jamie were playing together and, trying to come up with something
new. They never approached you, yeah?
Yeah, they approached me to come down and have a bash with them. So I did. I just grabbed an acoustic guitar and went down and the three of us started playing, and then so that was the beginning of Cattletruck.
Really? And a bit of a click happening, or not yet?
Oh, well, fairly rapidly. It was funny because we were just really irreverent, and we were just doing covers, and we really didn't give a shit. We were really just doing it for fun. Mm. I think Charles came and played sax with us. I'd met Charlie back in some little band I played with back when he was at La Trobe Uni briefly. Anyway, I think it was four of us then. So we started playing, and we would just do it for fun, but we'd do stuff like, we were pretty cheeky, and because we weren't electric, we were really portable. So we'd do stuff like we'd find out someone was having a big party wherever, Carlton or whatever it was, Fitzroy, and we'd just rock up. Kind of like in one car, we just rock up with our instruments and set up out the front in the street and start playing.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And people loved it. People really liked it. They liked the irreverence of it. They liked the kind of punkiness of it. They liked, the music was kind of good. So it was kind of a little bit rockabilly.
Originals.
A little bit rockabilly, a little bit punk.
Covers or originals?
And we do stuff like that. You could call it a pop-up if you like.
Were they cover songs or originals?
Yeah, at that stage they were all covers.
Right.
How
does the original writing come up and start?
Well, I'd kind of always been writing. I did mention that I think I wrote my first song when I was about maybe 13 or something.
How did you get serious about it to go, I actually want to perform these?
Well, I think what happened was, so at that early stage with that band, we were doing these pop-ups here and there, and we started getting a bit of a reputation. And we do stuff like, you probably know Rob First, who ran Beat Magazine and who's a piano player, and before that he was a promoter.
Yep.
Quite an active promoter, but he had a big night at this pub called the Metropole in Fitzroy at the time. We had a night there, big groovy night, and so we decided, let's go and crash the Metropole. So we rocked up there one night on their big night, set up out the front in the street, started playing, and basically emptied his room. Everyone came down to watch us on the street, which was Absolutely hilarious. Anyway, we ended up getting quite a good little following. People liked it.
So you thought to yourself, let's do some originals, yeah?
Sort of. I mean, I was keen to record. I didn't think we were ready for it, but an opportunity came up. To do some free recording for some guy who was a student studying recording at some tiny little studio in Richmond.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, we should probably do something original because we're going to actually bother to record, which was sort of a big deal for a little band at that time.
Absolutely.
Brought in one of my tunes, a song called Never Is, worked it up.
And thought, geez, this doesn't sound too bad. I might have a career here.
I think I'd always wanted a career, but I didn't think it was, up until around that point, I didn't think it was ever really going to happen. Yeah. But, of course, do that first recording, and we kept doing it. We did a lot of shows, and we were completely independent. We'd self-promote, and we started getting quite big houses. We were starting to pull quite reasonable numbers.
Yeah, that's a good sign.
For various reasons.
A good sign.
Yeah, like it's sort of... Things build by word of mouth, particularly back then.
But any band, Paul, a lot of bands can just gig, and it is what it is, and yeah, they get a few people there, and that's it. But when it's building, each gig, there's more and more people. It's connecting, and nothing's different. It's the same now digitally, and it was the same back then physically.
Yeah, well, there was a buzz. There was a buzz on the band basically after a period of a year or two. And of course we just capitalised on it. And
so, how did you get signed then? If you then start to put all this together,
well, it was quite a path to there, because after that particular recording, we'd also been doing some other recordings. We'd been doing some live. I had a studio space by that stage where we'd rehearse in Paran, just like a big space above a shop. It was quite good. I guess just through my connections with the Hunters and Collectors guys, I knew Johnny Archer, their bass player and sort of tech guy, quite well. He was doing these live to digital 2-track recordings at that time with some new technology. And I said, well, can you come and record us, at my place? He said, no problem. So he recorded a session. We did, 6 songs or something there, live to 2-track, and it wasn't bad. So I had that recording, and then we did a studio recording of my song Never Is, and we're like, well, let's put it out. So I arranged to...
Cassette?
Have them mastered and pressed.
To vinyl?
Yeah, we did 7-inch vinyl.
Yeah. So, okay, gotcha.
I think we did 1,000, I don't know.
Yep.
But that was kind of a big step because it wasn't easy to do that back then, and not many indie bands did it, to be honest.
No, and the few that did actually do it did really well. The Saints and whatever, the Chosen Few did it, and they did really well. There was a few bands, if you had the guts to get up and do it, and then make them available at your shows, it was kind of rare, so it was great.
Well, we did it. So what we did, I arranged from memory. We took the Prince of Wales upstairs, the band room, took that for a night. Our own night. I can't remember who the support acts were. We had a couple of support acts were on. We were the headline act, and it was a giveaway. So everyone that came in and paid whatever it was on the door, wasn't much, I can't remember, got a free single.
Wow, yeah, good marketing.
And that worked really well. So, we got rid of quite a number of singles. We got a lot of airplay on the public radio stations. I think right across Australia, actually, but certainly in Melbourne.
Well, interestingly too, back then, is you said you get radio airplay. So if you get it on 3XY, you're really doing well. But
no, it wasn't. That wasn't happening.
But Triple R and PBS and all those, they were really influential back then, and could actually help break you, which is not the case anymore. That's for sure. I can assure you of that.
That's very true. They were extremely influential, and they were the only place you could hear stuff that wasn't mainstream. It was even before FM radio, I think. And, we were big supporters of those stations. We did many benefit shows supporting Triple R, supporting PBS and so on, and happy to do so. And of course, they got behind us as well, which was great. And anyway, so that was good. But then from there, the next step was basically, we were getting quite a few bookings, but then a young agent at Premier Artists, who I'm sure you know, the fabulous Gerard Schlagheck.
Oh, he took you on, did he?
he took an interest, yes. And for various reasons, he kind of liked the irreverence of it all.
Well, I used to see you hanging around Premier because, I was at Mushroom at the time. And I used to see you hanging around there all the time. That's a good sign because they're the people that get you the gigs.
Yeah, he was really fabulous. Look, we were portable and we were cheap and we were keen to work, so that always helps. He got behind it and, we were pretty flexible. So we started getting through Gerard and indirectly through Frank and Premier, we started getting heaps of gigs and many, many, many support shows, which was really great at the time. Then I decided we should go to Sydney, and so we took it up to Sydney, which, literally on the smell of an oily rag, we were just crashing on various people that we did or didn't know. We were just crashing in their houses in King's Cross, sleeping on the balcony.
Now, this would be around the time of Uncanny X-Men too, yeah?
Yeah, they would have been going at that stage, yes. But they were big and mainstream, and we were definitely very alternative at that point. So, but, it was great. We got a bit of a profile happening in Sydney, just, off our own bat, and we did lots of little gigs, little headline shows up there at the little inner city venues.
Now, is that where you got spotted by Regular?
Not sure, actually. I'm not really sure the Regular connection that we ultimately ended up with, but we started, as it happens, the industry starts, once you can pull 500 people, as it was back then, basically, on your own, of course, the industry starts circling like the sharks start circling. They can smell the blood in the water.
Yeah, yeah.
So there was a lot of that going on. And, I'd become more ambitious at the time, and it was an amazing time for Australian music.
Oh, you were definitely a man about town, there's no doubt about that.
Oh, out and about, doing it all.
I remember on many occasions being out with all the Mushroom girls, and who should be there but our good friend Paul from Cattletruck.
Yeah, well, it was funny. See, Mushroom never really made me a decent offer.
No.
And funnily enough, but what was happening is because I was writing as well, and we were doing kind of mainly originals. I think by that stage, I won't say they were great, but they were original. There was a lot of interest in Australian songs, Australian songwriters. It was kind of peaking. I mean, this is when Australian music really started making big inroads internationally, either both on the college circuit in the US for the more, I guess, alternative bands in it, but also in the mainstream, And in that particular period, of course, Men at Work had really kind of started that new role of the ball. And, you had In Excess, you had Divinals, you had, quite a number of Australian, AC/DC, of course.
And there was Cattletruck amongst it all.
Well, not really, but trying to be amongst it. I was sort of inspired by it and thinking, well, now's a really good time to have a really good crack at it. So
did you approach Regular or did they approach you?
Don't really remember, but it may have indirectly, they may have heard of us through doing shows in Sydney, and they may have heard of us through their relationship with Kate Sobrano.
I remember at the time quite clearly. Who did Resurrection Shuffle around the same time as you? Was that Jimmy?
Yeah, Barnesy did a version.
Because I remember at the time, I went, oh God, here we got Cattletruck doing it now. Jimmy's doing it. Oh, that's not good.
Well, I think he might have actually preempted us to that. But the lead up to that the lead up to getting signed was kind of interesting because I was very keen. I sort of realised that the Australian market was and still is really very small in terms of international scale.
Absolutely.
And I knew, I had friends and peers who were at that point really successful in Australia and hadn't made any inroads overseas, and they were still slogging their guts out here, and none of them were really making money. They were breaking even, if lucky.
We had no success overseas as Mushroom, I can assure you of that. I mean, we sent Jimmy over to do the shows and we had Geffen behind us and we still couldn't get anywhere. He came back home and, we really couldn't get any success over there. I mean, the big one was when we had the top 10 with Locomotion with Kylie.
Exactly. But, so it was... it was not obviously very difficult to break internationally, but I thought a first step would be to have, one, I wanted a manager. So I've been managing it up to this point and it was going, really, really well.
Well, who did you get?
Well, there wasn't, the thing to me was I wanted an Australian manager with international experience, with a view to trying to, get some success internationally and hopefully an international record deal and a push in bigger territories. And at that point, there wasn't many Australian managers around who had that kind of experience. So by virtue of those kind of early trips up to Sydney, really early on, partly through that, MMA, which was Chris Murphy's company, and In Excess's company, really, became very interested in me, or us, me. There was also a connection there because I knew Sean Kelly from the Models quite well, and Sean had gone from Mushroom Camp over to Chris Murphy, really. And so anyway, MMA there was a young guy working at MMA at the time, and so all of our sort of action came from the ground up. So there was, the lowest guy on the totem pole at MMA was a big fan, and was coming to all of our shows in Sydney, and he'd come down to Melbourne.
Who was that?
His name was Justin. Was it Justin Van Stom?
Don't know him.
You're going back a long time. I think his name was Justin Van Stom. But anyway, he was championing. He was championing us within MMA. So they got right into it. They were kind of keen. They gave us our first national tour, which was opening for the Models at the height of their success, which was a fantastic run.
Good combination. Yeah, not bad.
Oh, yeah. Well, it worked well, and it was a lot of fun, and it was, we were very lucky to have that opportunity, and it was a hoot.
Oh, it would have been with all that lot in fighting, yeah, it would have been fantastic.
Yeah, there was kind of peak Models, if you like. They had James Freud on bass, they had Wendy Matthews singing on backups, they had James Valentine on sax, Barton Price on drums. It was a really, really good, it was the Australian-made concert series lineup.
I remember it well.
Was that lineup, and, great material. They had hit singles at that stage. Anyway, it was a really great run. It was a lot of fun. And so, being young and really cheeky and probably stupid, I'm like, I want an international manager, so I want Chris Murphy or someone else who shall remain nameless, because they were kind of the only ones around at the time. So I ended up in this kind of bidding war between another manager who shall remain nameless, who had quite an international track record, and Chris Murphy from MMA, which is insane because I'm like all of 22 or 23 years old, cocky as all get out. So anyway, I get into this, I set up this kind of, basically a bidding war between these two big-time hotshots. And anyway, I made a decision away from MMA, which was hindsight, I think, was the wrong
back
decision.
Here in Melbourne, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're talking about it. Yeah, okay.
Oh, and MMA, well, that's another thing. They're like, would you move to Sydney? We want you to move to Sydney. And I wasn't particularly keen at that time to do that either. So anyway, for a number of reasons, I chose someone else.
Well, they couldn't help themselves, Paul, because Melbourne was the music capital of Australia, and they used to dream about being the music capital of Australia. All they were was the financial capital of Australia. But but no gigs. I've got to give Chris Murphy and MMA some credit. I mean, look, they were very, very, very good at what they did. They were very supportive of Australian music, and they broke In Excess, globally. And anyway, so long story short, so this manager that I went along with, I was pretty overt about what I wanted. Who will not be named, yeah.
That's right. And so anyway, I think we were shopping stuff around, basically trying to get a deal hopefully with an international. So I went to CBS or Sony, I think it was probably still CBS back then, and they gave us a Guernsey to go and do some demoing for a couple of weeks up at their studio in Sydney, which we did.
Now, when they do that, and they were always doing that, I can never understand it. You go and have a look at the band play live, and if you're a good A&R person, you go, man, they're on fire, we're signing them. I always used to think when they do it, let's do some demos, let's have a listen. Mate, you're in a holding pattern.
Yes, well, we were, and the sessions weren't great, and frankly the material wasn't great, and it just didn't go anywhere. And so in a sense we were running out of options. I guess Regular knew of us, and I think that my management at the time...
Was it Jeremy Fabrini at Regular?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, Martin Fabini.
Martin, Jeremy's being brother, yeah.
His brother's Jeremy. So anyway, they, I think I'm not sure who approached who, and I think that Regular knew of me probably through the Sobrano connection, because we were sort of still friends back then and what have you.
So
and
you signed to Regular, yeah?
Well, it wasn't that simple. I remember, like you were saying before about, good A&R person should just be able to go and see the band in a room and say, yep, that's good.
Well, I can tell you, we knew what was going on at Mushroom. We were all over it. And we knew that it was going too slowly for you. I can tell you that because we had meetings on it. And we knew that the Cattletruck situation wasn't looking good. It was moving too slowly, and you should have been signed and you should have had your album out. It took way too long to come out.
Yeah, I agree. I think with hindsight, that's right. But anyway, but I remember Martin coming down and my management hosting him here in Melbourne, and we were doing, I can't remember what it was. I'm pretty sure we were playing at the great venue, the old venue down in St Kilda, which was a fabulous room. I don't know if we were headlining downstairs or whether we were opening for someone upstairs, but it was huge and it was a really great night and we were on fire and it was great. And he just came in to witness it basically, and I think largely on the back of that went, yep, we'll do it. So
that's the Regular signing, yeah.
So which was good. I mean, I thought they were a good label. He gave me a hell of a lot of leeway, probably too much rope to hang myself on. But we launched into trying to record, and Chris Murphy had an opinion about what we should do. With hindsight, was probably right, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted a full-blown big studio record with high production values and, something a little bit sort of cutting edge. And by that stage, I was not really interested in the kind of alternative scene per se.
Well, you were looking for real success, big success.
Well, that's right, actually. I mean, basically that's right. So away we went, and that whole process took forever. It took a very long time. It was really difficult. We weren't the best players. There was lineup changes before those sessions, et cetera, et cetera. And then away we went, and we just worked the hell out of it all. I had great support from Premier. But
was the first single Resurrection Shuffle? Was it that or not?
No. The first single was a song called Change.
Right, that's right.
Which is still stands up today, in my opinion, as a pretty good song, a great production, great feel, a little bit political. But, that just kind of, in a sea of In Excess, Divinals, I'm Talking, whatever, there was a whole lot of killer Australian mainstream music coming out of that period, and my stuff just got lost.
Yeah, and I think, look, as I said, I think we knew what was going on. It was dragging. Unfortunately, it was dragging, and there just needed to be a lot more urgency about getting it out and people knowing Cattletruck. And it took quite a while for your album to come out. I mean,
it did. It took a long time to record and finish, and it took a long time to come out. And we had the dreaded artwork issues, hold ups, and there was just problem after another, one after another. And then we got it out, and we were lucky enough to get quite a bit of countdown exposure, which sort of helped. But it just didn't take off as I'd hoped. Did you end up doing
a festival hall? Did you do the festival hall or maybe support someone?
Not as a headline. I remember we opened for New Order there.
I think that's what it might have been, because we may have been touring them at the time.
It was early days. No, they were being toured by Ken West and Vivian Lee. So we had a little bit of a connection with them for a period in the early days. They put us on to, I think it was the second Violent Femmes tour, which was also fantastic. And because we were, in a way, besides lacking the songwriting genius of those guys, we were similar in some ways in the early days when we were sort of semi-acoustic act, with a whole lot of attitude.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Not much in the way of chop. So they went, who's a good support for the Violent Femmes?
Yeah, it works with them, doesn't it?
These guys,
So what's happening here? So this album's, we're dragging our feet and it comes out. But you did have, where did Resurrection Shuffle go to? It's top 20?
Where did it get on the chart?
Yeah, did it go top 20? It did quite well. We all knew about it, that's for sure.
Well, I can't, you got me on the numbers here. It might have scraped top 20 nationally. I think it may have gone top 30 nationally, but really briefly.
And then so what's happened from there?
Well, we were touring like crazy, trying to, just doing what you do. We were touring like crazy.
Were you making money from those tours, or were you coming out of it with nothing?
Well, we were turning over quite a lot of money, relatively speaking, but we weren't seeing any of it. And this was...
Isn't that just, it's the injustice of it all. It's the same old story. And, you really do need really good management when that's happening to make sure honesty is part of the policy and that the band are looked after, but man, it just gets lost in a lot of them.
Yeah, well, I'm not saying there was necessarily dishonesty going on.
I'm not saying that either, but I'm saying, if I say honesty, money being kept tight.
It's just that thing. I mean, you have to do it. You basically have to, well, back then you had to tour to support your record.
But it's keeping money tight and making sure there's money left over for the band to live. Too many times, I won't reiterate it. I'll say it's not dishonesty. It's lack of professionalism to make sure the people that are making the money are actually seeing some of the money. And it used to just drip through everywhere else.
But, I agree. And after a period of time, it came to a head because we'd racked up, apparently, some fairly substantial debts, including allegedly foregone management commissions and, huge bills here, there and everywhere. I mean, my crew always got paid. And but look, it got to a point where, we put out a number of singles off that record and nothing took us over the edge, sadly. And yet we kept touring, we kept playing, and we, the live business sort of, kept chugging along, but we seemed to be going further and further down the hole. And I was getting really annoyed with management for a number of reasons. They hadn't secured me an international release. We'd come very close, but it hadn't happened. And the business just, the dollars and cents weren't adding up correctly as far as I was concerned, and we were working very hard.
And that was the end of Cattletruck, yeah?
Well, in a sense, I mean, the ending was quite amusing in a way. It's a tragicomic ending, really. I was basically really pissed off with the management by this point because, we're turning over lots of money, yet we're somehow going further and further in debt. They hadn't got me an international release. We didn't have a top 10 record. In my mind at that time, there was a whole lot of issues. And so I basically said to the band, I said, look, we've got to stop touring. Because we're just getting further and further down this hole. This record's basically done its dash. We need to do something else. And we need to recollect what we're doing and work out what to do. And so I said to them, I want to basically stop touring. I want to get rid of management. I want to start doing basically cover band gigs.
Well, you weren't in a different position from a lot of others. The last Models tour was purely... The last Models tour that was performed was purely done to pay off debt. They actually didn't want to do the tour, but they had to do the tour to pay off their debt. So it was so common, to get into this debt. And that's where I say it comes back to professional management. And you get people like the, MMAs who they were big. And so there's big overheads just in the management company. It gets very difficult to leave money for the band themselves who are creating the music. It's a travesty, mate. So off you go and start doing some cover gigs and start making money, of course.
It didn't actually get to that, but that was the circuit that was like the early tribute band things, your Grand Wazoos. They were all doing well.
They're doing big business, mate, back then. Cover band.
They're doing big business. I already had a horn section. I'm like, okay, let's do like a soul R&B band just for a while. Let's just do that, get some of these shows, get some money, and then take it from there. So I was sort of suggesting this on one hand, and on the other hand, the management was getting in the ears of the rest of the band going, oh, no, that's a really, really bad idea. You should just keep going. You should keep the grind up. And basically, you should sack Paul.
Imagine sacking the singer. That never works.
The front man, the singer, and the main songwriter.
Yeah.
And basically the producer as well.
Yeah.
you should sack him and it'll be fine.
Yeah.
So that's ultimately what happened there. And then
you were given your marching orders.
Yeah, I was giving them marching orders. They got another singer. I can't remember the name. They got another singer to do my bit.
As opposed from the slap on the ego, right? It probably was a lot of weight off your shoulders too.
Yes, yeah. In a way, I was kind of pretty over it all by that stage. I was tired of media. I was tired of radio. I was tired of TV. I was tired of the slog. I was basically really burnt out. You know, I was very passionate, and I had a very, really big red hot go at it all, and it had turned to shite. So anyway, so they put in another singer, and they limped along for another couple of months, and of course that went nowhere. And then my manager decided to sue me for, I can't imagine what the initial figure was, somewhere in the order of $250,000.
Fantastic.
I didn't have one brass resume at that stage. And so, you know, that was pretty bad. And I ended up, it was serious. It was all on. Anyway, we ended up settling out of court on the steps, actually, and for a much reduced sum. But then I had to go and take a personal loan out at, you know, something like 22% or 25% interest, a personal loan to pay this person to get them out of my life, which I did.
That's slap on the door shut, isn't it, eh?
So, but what was, it was funny because the upside, well, not the upside, but during that period when everything was not going well and the band, I wanted the band to stop touring, what have you. I need to keep earning. So I had this little trio, I put together this little trio called Gas, which was myself and a rhythm section. Yeah. And we were playing these little, I think I had a regular Thursday night at the Toc H Hotel back then. Back then, they had 1,000 private school kids in there from, you know, around the neighbourhood, regular as, and the promoter was...
Toc H, I saw Rose Tattoo play there.
Yeah, well, the promoter was a friend of mine and had a tiny little stage, but he'd put me on, he put us on for a couple of sets every Thursday night, and it wasn't big money, but it was regular money. And we were just doing covers, and it was actually quite good, you know, it was all right. And so when my Cattletruck turned to shit, basically, I thought, well, I've got, you know, three quarters of a band here. Let's do that. And so that's when I moved into. You know,
you talk about that. You had the horn section and all that, but when you listen to that Gas record, it's a pretty hard rocking record. So
that was I mean, I had a horn section with Cattletruck, unfortunately. Yeah, but which put me off horn sections for life.
Yeah, but you know, Gas was quite a hard rocking band, and so how long did Gas go for?
Well, it went for I don't know, a couple of years. Yeah. So I added Brett Kingman came on guitar.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Who's a monster guitarist. Yep. Brett's pedigree was quite long, even by that stage. Uncanny X-Men. He was James Rain's solo.
Yeah, that's right.
When James Rain did his solo stuff.
And he had his brother Scott, Yeah,
Berger's been on that. Scott played with me in Cattletruck, late period Cattletruck.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, because there was a lot of guitar stuff going on in that. And I wasn't covering it by myself as well as singing. So I knew those guys. And we were doing just like little gigs around Melbourne, but we were pretty wild. And it was mainly covers, but we're a pretty good and wild kind of act, and we quickly established quite a really strong little live following around Melbourne. And you know, we had a lot of regular gigs. We had the Saturday night residency at the Station Hotel in Greville Street for, I don't know, 3 years or something. Yeah. Capacity. They've never ever had a band that pulled more people than us by the end of it there. So, and that went on for a while. What I did then was I thought, well, I think I got a big APRA check or something, and I thought, well, I reckon I should take this band into the studio and we'll throw down a kind of live in the studio recording, which we did at Sing Sing.
Oh, yeah.
And then I was talking to, you would remember Neil Bradbury?
Yeah, Neil. I knew Neil very well. Worked with Neil for many years.
Yeah. Well, so Neil, at that point, Neil was A&R for the Mushroom subsidiary White Label Records. Mm-hmm. And I'd known Neil for quite a long time, and he sort of knew what I was capable of. And went in and had a chat with Neil, and I said, you know, I want a new record deal, basically. And I said, I want basically I want a solo deal, and I want a really, good deal with a big budget and big support. What can you do? And he went, oh, well, yeah, I think we might be interested. So I said, look, I've got this little album we've just done. I said, how about I give this to you and put it out, do a single and see what happens. But I was really I was more excited about what I saw as the next stage, which was having a decent budget and being completely in control and going in, writing some killer songs without the pressure of touring and what have you, and going in and doing a really, really good record with a big, big support from Mushroom. Anyway, so we pressed up the single, and from that gas, I think it was, like the week before the release, basically Neil was offered the position to head up EMI Australia, which he took up.
Went to Sydney, yeah.
So he left the Mushroom fold, and
that was the end of gas.
Mushroom turned around and went, well, anything that Neil signed in the last 12 months, see you later. So I was asked to come in and see Warren Costello, who recently joined Mushroom, and I'd had quite a very good relationship with Warren when he was working at Festival, because they were my distributors for Australia, and they did a very good job.
So he knew you.
So it was terrible. I had to go in and meet Warren in completely different circumstances, and basically he had to give me my marching orders.
God.
So at that point I went, I'm kind of done with this.
This is it. I'm going to get a job for a while. I'm just going to relax.
Oh, look, it was a huge kick in the guts. And it was, I suffered probably quite bad depression for quite an extended period over that, a lot of soul searching, and I decided that basically I can't just point the finger at everyone else and it's all my fault. I didn't write good enough songs, which may or may not be true.
Well, mate, the catalogue, look, I don't think for everybody listening that's not the case. If you go, he came to Laneway, and if you have a look at the catalogue of material, there is some fantastic material. And I think what's basically come out for me, for you, Paul, is that it probably now goes back, after talking to you about your life, goes back to the start. Your acoustic material, to me, is so much better than your electrified material. You have a knack for to be able to write a song acoustically and sing to it, and it all gels and works. And not a lot of people can do that. And it may be the way you play guitar or whatever. It works well, and I think it's an absolutely it works, and people can listen to it. It's all online under Cattletruck, and I just think it's fantastic. And you've now continued to write and to get back into it. We have been talking, everybody, for about 5 years now about his electric album, but the acoustic material keeps coming out.
Well, thank you very much, Vince. I don't mind doing acoustic stuff. I don't generally do a lot of it, but with some of your encouragement during the COVID period, it kind of got me back into it. And
well, if you have a look at the corner gig where you've done the acoustic, it's all there. It really does work, and it's hard for some people to do acoustic. Neil Young is so good at it, I think. Jackson Brown is great at it, but far and few between.
But yeah, it's not easy to do, and as you say, not everyone can do it well, and not all material lends itself really to an acoustic treatment. Kind of delivery method, as I've worked out, as I found last year when I was doing all of the old Cattletruck stuff acoustic live, which I'd never really
think one of
done before.
Your new one's Buffalo Man, is it? Buffalo Man?
Yeah.
What a great track. Great track. It's just a shame you're not living in the States, because stuff like that would work over there. But look, it's been great talking to you. It's been a long discussion there, but we all know Paul Janovskis. Nothing comes easy from Paul. It takes time. And, and we got to the end of it where, there's a lot of material up online from Cattletruck, and there's more coming, and there's a whole new album we would hope early next year, but there is also the singles along the way. And so I think it's been fantastic, Paul, a real talent, and it's great to see people like you then continue on. Yes, you've had your break for years, but then go, look, I still love doing it, and you're doing it now. All right. Good talking to you, my friend.
Yeah, Yeah, it's great talking to you, Vince. It's been a while since I've done it, sort of like a equivalent of a radio promo or radio interview. I guess it's a podcast thing. But
it's been good talking to you, and I'll be seeing you at your next gig, okay?
Okay, thanks, Vince. Thanks for the opportunity. See you later, people.
Talk soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, there you have it, another Laneway Talks. If you enjoyed that, just search Laneway Talks for more great conversations.